Okay, it brings us now to just after 8 p.m. Time now for the Tech Talk segment. And we are going to be joined by Jan Vermalen in a moment or so, who's from My Broadband. We're discussing the WhatsApp cybercrime bill in South Africa. Now, forwarding intimate images without consent and messages which incite violence or damage to property could result in a jail term of up to 15 years. Now, the latest cybercrime bill, which is due to be signed into law by the president, holds creators and distributors of unlawful content equally accountable. Businesses and electronic communication service providers like WhatsApp are obliged to report suspected cybercrime to police within 72 hours. Now, police will have the power to investigate, search, access, and seize private digital information. And to talk to us more about this, we welcome My Broadband senior journalist, Jan Vermalen, who tonight is coming to us live from Cape Town, as I understand, and not at home. So, yes, from the West Cape, Jan Vermalen, good evening to you. Welcome once again to Columbia.
Good evening. It's a pleasure to be here.
Great stuff. Great to have you with us. Thanks for taking the time. This WhatsApp cybercrime bill. Now, we've discussed cybercrimes previously on the show many times before, and other types of bills that have come into play, the information censorship bill, etc. For those who don't understand this bill, give it to us in a nutshell. Tell us a bit more about this particular bill.
Sure. The Cybercrimes Bill started off as the Cybercrime and Cybersecurity Bill. It was heavily criticized as another form of potential censorship, of pushing responsibility onto the internet service provider instead of holding the perpetrators of crime properly to account, and so on. But some of those concerns were addressed. So firstly, the cybersecurity part of the bill was dropped off. So part of the concerns with the cybersecurity part was that it would actually criminalize the work that cybersecurity researchers do here in South Africa. And in fact, even really went so far as to criminalize just accessing the internet. Like you could, based on the way the law was written, a lawyer might be able to argue in front of a court that just accessing the internet was effectively a cybersecurity violation. It had huge problems, but a lot of those problems were addressed by chopping off the cybersecurity part of the bill and focusing purely on cyber crimes. Now, that doesn't mean the bill is necessarily flawless, but we do have problems in addressing cybercrime in South Africa, and part of that problem is prosecution. So, we can talk maybe a bit later if there's time about the other side of the equation, which is the police actually getting around to arresting people who commit crimes on the internet or using the internet. But the other half of this problem is prosecuting cybercrime. Now, it's not that some of the stuff that's in the cybercrimes bill weren't illegal before, but you'd have to argue from all different kinds of laws in South Africa to make your case. The cybercrimes bill aims to make it simpler and to make it so that crimes committed over the internet carry as hefty a penalty as if you were to do it in real life. And so, for example, a key issue in the cybercrimes bill that I think everybody can agree on is this issue of what they've euphemistically called intimate images. And that's just legal speak and soft language for things like revenge porn. This is where a couple might have taken
seen scandals like this in the news, in the headlines.
Yes. And so we've seen exactly that. Couples taking intimate photos together, they break up, and then one of the parties goes and uploads those intimate photos onto the internet without the other person's consent. right? To with usually the intent to embarrass them in some way, and so one aspect of this bill is to criminalize that. So it's not even just a civil thing. That's a potentially big change. To criminalize that, put a jail term to that, and a hefty fine to go with that, and I'm pretty sure that that's universally received in the legal fraternity, if not universally, then near universally received as a good thing, because of the way that we've seen people abuse other people's trust and not really face particularly strong consequences for that, other than having their name dragged through the mud in the courts of public opinion. But not all incidents of, I think an important thing to remember is, while somebody who has posted revenge porn on the internet, getting outed on social media and having their name attached to this heinous act that they've committed, not all cases of revenge porn hit Twitter, right? And so there are plenty of people out there who have just not received justice. And so that's part of what this bill is trying to put in place. As I said, there's a lot of other stuff. It's far from perfect. But this is one of the good aspects of it. And on top of that, I should add, and this is perhaps the point of discussion to have, is that it's not just the person who posts the pictures who ends up being in line to go to jail. It's everybody in the chain who forwards it. So when you've got we see this kind of thing happening in high schools, which is a huge problem. And so those high school kids who then take those private photos of someone else and forward them along on their WhatsApp groups, and eventually that gets exposed, that's a crime, and that will come to bite the perpetrators, even the ones who just go on and forward the images. So what you end up seeing happening is a private image gets forwarded to one person, and then to another person, and then to another person, and then it gets posted to a group. And then it gets posted to Twitter, and then it just gets posted all over the internet. Yeah. Every single person in that chain will be guilty of a crime under the Cybercrimes Bill.
So this is actually a means of tracking and tracing each and every single aspect along this chain of events, right?
Now, but they can't. That's now the challenge is enforcing this, right? Because the fact is, WhatsApp, which is one of the most popular platforms in South Africa to do this on, it is encrypted end to end, and so it's not like state security or the Hawks or SAPS is going to plug into everybody's WhatsApp and police this stuff. The only way that a criminal will be brought to justice is if somebody reports them. If somebody along this chain of events says, hey, what you're doing is wrong, and then brings that evidence to the police.
So we're not going to have like an NSA center where they've got delegated people monitoring the WhatsApp platform day to day kind of thing. We're not having anything like that.
Firstly, to the best of my knowledge, unless Facebook has done something to weaken encryption in WhatsApp since they implemented it in the first place, that's not possible. And secondly, to your larger point there, we actually do have mass surveillance centers in South Africa which have been declared unlawful. So whether that's caused them to be shut down or not, I don't know, but we do have them. But yeah, they won't be able to do anything with WhatsApps unless the WhatsApps somehow get forwarded to people who are able to share it with state security or with law enforcement. No.
Okay. Now, you mentioned that the cybercrime bill defines and criminalizes several digital offenses across multiple platforms. So this could be WhatsApp, Facebook, Twitter, whatever the case is, right? How does South Africa compare to other countries in the world of cybercrime?
Poorly. We have a lot of cybercrime and very little enforcement in this country. I actually had a conversation with a police officer a couple of weeks ago who was out of his depth. That's the reason he was speaking to me. He felt out of his depth. Like he's a police detective. He is good at what he does, but he does not have the tools to deal with the new kinds of complaints that he's getting. So people come into the police station and say, I've been scammed on OLX. I've been scammed on Facebook, or Bid or Buy, or pick a platform, or even platforms like highly specialized platforms that deal with very expensive breeds of dog, for example, or fish, where people pay tens of thousands of rand for a new puppy or kitten, only for the scammers to run away with the money. And there was never a dog, there was never a cat. They were just scamming you from the beginning. So our cyber crimes, we have cyber crimes investigations units in this country, but they are under-resourced, and they cannot possibly get around to every single crime that's reported.
Do you think
now
that the bill is going to be implemented, we're going to see a turnaround in fortune whereby maybe the president will allocate a bigger budget for the cybercrime unit for them to tackle these type of problems? Or
I certainly hope so. And the other thing I hope for is for a couple of big convictions in using the cyber crimes bill that will disincentivize. This is the thing that we see elsewhere in the world. So I usually compare us to the United States, which is unfair, but if we look at the situation in the United States or in Europe, not everywhere in Europe, let's pick on like the United Kingdom or Finland or Sweden. The fact is that people think twice about how they about when they commit a cybercrime. Okay. And you see that the people who commit cybercrimes are those who can cover their tracks well. They're skilled. The second you up the skill level required to commit a crime, you drop the amount of crime, right? So right now, we've got, to be blunt, fairly unskilled cyber criminals in this country that are able to get away with what they're doing because enforcement is lacking. And so if enforcement steps up and we get a couple of big convictions, then hopefully you chase away all these opportunists who are not nearly technically skilled enough to hide properly on the internet. And then, hopefully we'll see a level of cybercrime in South Africa get reduced. Just today, by the way, just to get people to understand, it's not that the SAPs can't do anything. But certainly when they've got outside help, it's far more effective. What happened in South Africa is there was a syndicate who had scammed Microsoft United States. So some of these criminals are, so while I say, you have unskilled criminals, you also have incredibly sophisticated criminals. These scammed Microsoft in the United States out of laptops worth 4 million rand. They had another shipment of laptops that landed at OR Tambo, 170 laptops apparently, worth 7.5 million rand. Yeah. And the Hawks was on the case, so they saw the new shipment arriving at OR Tambo, 7.5 million, and they were coordinating with US law enforcement. And so they've made 3 arrests already. The investigation is ongoing. But yeah, this is an example of where the Hawks and US law enforcement work together to nail a syndicate operating out of South Africa that is scamming people internationally. And so we do have enforcement in this country, but it's usually for much larger crime. If you get scammed out of 10,000 rand by some backyard online scammer, then our law enforcement don't have the resources to deal with that. And that's what needs to change.
So basically them dealing with more organized crime and much more bigger narco crime dealers, whatever the case is, as opposed to like your smaller criminals, right? How will the bill affect businesses, etc.? How would companies, marketing agencies, etc., how would this affect the world of business? I mean, surely there's going to be some sort of impact here.
There may be some. We'll see, I guess. I'm not convinced that it'll necessarily affect businesses except internet service providers, where there is some concern that they will be held liable for what people say over their platforms. That's like the one. That's like the one major concern. But for the most part, like other than having an obligation to cooperate with law enforcement when it comes to them investigating cybercrime. So when they bring you a suitable court order, you must comply. But I mean, that's fairly standard. So the changes will be small, if any, in this particular case, I think. I stand to be corrected, but I think that the biggest change has got to do with individuals being held responsible for their actions in disseminating the things that the bill outlaws. Now, we've spoken about revenge porn. One of the things that's quite contentious is the issue of permitted speech. And so the bill talks about hate speech and inciting violence. And there is some concerns amongst free speech advocates that's quite fuzzy. What do we mean? Like, it's some forms of hate speech are very easy to identify, but like, there's other forms of speech. I'm thinking of, for example, the painting that caused such a stir, the spear, right, of former President Jacob Zuma. Now, a photo of that was published on an online news website. Now, a less generous administration, might put pressure on the judiciary to rule that that's hate speech. And there's some concern over that, for example.
Okay. Well, there you have it, guys. Jan has obviously, ironed out the cybercrime bill. Jan, thank you so much for your time tonight, for, taking the time to explain to us the cybercrime bill and how this will affect one and all. Have yourself an awesome weekend. Until we chat again. Take care.
Thank you so much. You too. Have a great day.
Okay, cheers. That's Jan Vermalen talking to us from Cape Town. The WhatsApp cybercrime bill will be signed into law by the president, and forwarding intimate messages without consent and messages which incite violence or damage to property could land you in jail of up to 15 years. But as Jan said, to ensure digital safety, the problem we face is that how to prosecute in this regard. Well, time will tell, and that's where we will leave it now on the Tech Talk. It brings us now to 8:20. Stay tuned.